The nurse shoved a clipboard into my hands while my daughter Ruby cried behind a curtain, blood drying in a line down her cheek, and the first thing she said was, "We need the father's signature too." I called Ethan again with shaking fingers. One ring. Straight to voicemail. I called a second time. Then a third. Ruby had fallen off the climbing wall at school and hit the metal edge on the way down. The doctor said she would need stitches, maybe more if the cut had gone deeper than it looked. My 8-year-old kept asking, "Where's Dad?" He said he always answers for me. I reached into my bag for our insurance card and pulled out the old family tablet instead, the cracked one we used on road trips. The screen lit up from one of those chat apps I didn't even know was still installed. A message flashed across it before I could stop myself from reading. "Are you still coming tonight? I don't want another excuse about your wife." There was a red heart beside the name. My mouth went dry so fast it hurt. I stared at the message, then at the little icon in the corner that showed it had come from Ethan's account. Not my account. His. Somehow that app was still signed in on the old tablet. Another message popped up before I could breathe. "Delete this one too." And that was the moment I knew two things at once. My daughter was lying in a hospital bed asking for her father, and my husband had gotten very good at making things disappear. He showed up 18 minutes later with fake panic on his face and his tie hanging loose like he'd been running. "I came as fast as I could," he said, bending over Ruby, kissing her hair, touching her shoulder with those careful hands that always made him look better than he was. If I had not seen the messages, I might have believed him. That was the worst part. Ethan always knew how to arrive just late enough to hurt me and just early enough to look innocent. I wish that had been the end of it. By the time Ruby was stitched up and asleep in the back seat, Ethan was back in his role. Concerned father. Calm husband. Responsible man. He drove with one hand and asked me normal questions in a normal voice, like what the doctor said and whether we should pick up antibiotics tonight. I answered him because my son Owen was at home with the neighbor, because Ruby was hurting, because sometimes survival looks a lot like silence. But I kept seeing that message burn across the tablet screen. "My name is Claire Holloway. I was 34 that night, mother of 2, owner of exactly 1 inherited house and a collection of unfinished dreams. Before kids, I did bookkeeping for a construction company and liked numbers because they behaved. They either added up or they didn't. Then Ruby was born, then Owen, then a life that got smaller in ways I did not notice until I was standing in it. Ethan liked to tell people I chose this life. Claire wanted to focus on the kids, he would say, smiling like a man who had generously granted a wish. What I had actually wanted was balance. Some work. Some home. Some part of myself that still belonged to me. But Ethan's business started growing, his hours got longer, and every conversation somehow ended with me being the one who made the sacrifice because it was temporary. Temporary stretched into 8 years. The house we lived in had belonged to my grandmother. It was the one solid thing in my life that did not have Ethan's fingerprints on it. White trim. Blue shutters. A kitchen that leaned a little to the left because old houses settle the way people do. My grandmother left it to me before she died, and Ethan used to call it our lucky start. Lately he called it an asset. That word should have scared me sooner. After Owen was born, I had a rough year. Not dramatic enough for movies, but dark enough to swallow whole afternoons. I had panic attacks. I cried in grocery store parking lots. I once sat on the laundry room floor because the sound of the dryer made me feel trapped and stupid and ashamed. Ethan held me through some of it. Or I thought he did. He filled prescriptions, drove me to one therapy appointment, told me we were a team. Eventually I got better. Slowly. Imperfectly. But better. Still, when you have ever been fragile, people never let you forget it. That mattered more than I understood then. About 6 months before Ruby's hospital night, Ethan changed in ways too small to explain and too big to ignore. He started taking work calls outside. He brought his phone into the shower. He turned the screen down when I walked into the room. He became oddly protective over things that had never mattered before, like passcodes and chargers and whether I borrowed his tablet when mine was dead. At first I told myself it was stress. Then one night I woke up at 2 a.m. and found him sitting at the edge of the bed, deleting messages. I know what I saw. His thumb moved fast, his face blue in the dark, his jaw tight in that guilty way people have when they think they are alone. When I asked who he was texting that late, he looked straight at me and said, "Nobody. Go back to sleep, Claire. You're doing that thing again." That thing. He said it softly, almost kindly, which made it crueler. I asked what thing. He gave a tired laugh. "Working yourself up. Looking for problems." You've been anxious all week. Then he kissed my forehead like I was a child with a fever. I remember lying awake after that, staring at the ceiling, hating that part of me that still wondered if he was right. Maybe I was seeing patterns because my body remembered fear too easily. But the body knows when something is wrong even when the mind is begging for peace. The night we got back from the hospital, Ethan carried Ruby inside, tucked her in, checked her bandage, and played hero until the children were finally asleep. Then he went downstairs, poured himself a drink, and started answering emails in the kitchen as if he had done nothing more suspicious than miss a call. I waited 10 minutes, then took the old tablet into the bathroom and locked the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the app. It was still there. Ethan's profile. Ethan's photo. Ethan's conversations. Some threads were empty, probably deleted from his phone. But not all of them. Jordan's chat was full of holes, like someone had yanked out random bricks and hoped the wall would still stand. There were flirty lines left behind. A hotel address. A photo of a steak dinner Ethan had supposedly eaten with clients. One message from her said, "You can't keep pretending forever." Another said, "I'm tired of hiding." I slid down to the floor beside the bathtub and pressed my hand over my mouth so he would not hear me break. I thought I was looking at an affair. I didn't know yet that I was looking at a plan. The next morning Ethan kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted him to stay home from work. He sounded warm, guilty, attentive. When I said no, he studied my face for a beat too long, like he was checking whether the ground beneath him was still safe. Then he picked up his coffee and said almost casually, "By the way, that refinance guy called again. We really should sign those papers this week. Rates are going to change." I felt every nerve in my body go cold. We had argued about the refinance twice already. Ethan claimed it would help us consolidate bills and free up cash for home repairs. But because the house was inherited, most of the paperwork had to run through me. I kept putting it off because something about his urgency felt wrong. Every time I asked simple questions like why the numbers kept changing or why he needed my grandmother's house tied to his business problems, he got irritated. Not explosive. Worse. Controlled. That morning he smiled at me over his coffee mug and said, "It's just paperwork, Claire. You always make things harder than they have to be." There was again. The message underneath the message. "You are the problem. You are the obstacle. You are the unstable one." After he left, I opened the tablet again. The chat with Jordan had a new line. "Did she calm down after last night?" Ethan replied, "She suspects things sometimes, but she always folds." I read that sentence 3 times. Not because I misunderstood it, but because I wished I did. Some betrayals stab you. Others explain every pain you have been trying not to name. I began taking screenshots and emailing them to a secret account I created under my maiden name. Each time I heard a floorboard creak, I locked the screen and shoved the tablet under a cushion. I felt ridiculous, sneaky, afraid. But fear can sharpen a woman who has spent years being blurred. 2 days later, I told Ethan I was taking Ruby to a follow-up appointment. Instead, after the appointment, I parked half a block from a restaurant downtown because the app showed his location nearby from a photo he had sent Jordan. I had never followed anyone before. I used to judge women who did things like that in movies. I understand them now. Ethan walked out of the restaurant laughing. Jordan came out beside him. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, polished and bright in a cream coat, one hand touching his arm in a way that made my stomach turn. He leaned down and kissed her quickly beside the valet stand, like a man used to stealing what he wanted in public because he had convinced himself he would never be caught. I watched it through the windshield and felt something inside me go very still. When I got home that evening, he was already there, acting normal. "How was the appointment?" he asked. "Did Ruby fuss about the stitches?" I stood in the kitchen looking at the same mouth that had been on another woman 3 hours before. He noticed I was staring and gave me that careful husband face. "What?" I asked him who Jordan was. He did not flinch. "That should tell you something about how long he had been lying." "Jordan Ellis?" he said like he was digging through harmless memory. "Mortgage consultant." "Why?" I said, "I saw you with her." He sighed and put his keys down slowly as if I were exhausting him. "Claire, I had coffee with her and a lender because of the refinance. You really need to stop jumping to the worst possible conclusion." He paused, then added the knife. "This is exactly why I wanted to handle the paperwork myself." I almost believed him for half a second, and that nearly ruined me more than the affair did. That night, after he went to sleep, I checked the app again. There was a new voice note from Jordan. I put in earbuds and pressed play. Her voice came through warm and low. I hated seeing you pull away from me at the restaurant. Tell me she didn't ruin your mood again. Friday will be worth it. After Friday, no more waiting. Friday. I listened to it 3 times, then looked at the calendar. Friday was the day Ethan had booked a mobile notary to come to the house for the refinance. My first instinct was to scream. My second was to survive. I started noticing everything after that. Ethan became sweeter at home, almost generous. He brought Ruby a stuffed rabbit and Owen dinosaur pajamas. He asked me if I wanted a massage. He told me I looked tired in that fake sympathetic tone men use when they want your weakness to sound like concern. Then he'd slide a paper toward me or mention Friday, or ask whether I'd found my social security card. Love bombing and pressure. Sugar and poison. At school pickup, the secretary stopped me and said, "Mrs. Holloway, do you still want your husband listed as the primary contact only?" I stared at her. Primary only? She frowned and showed me the form. Ethan had submitted an update that morning. My name was still there, but under his mother's. Third. I laughed because if I did not laugh I would have burst into flames. When I asked him about it later, he said it was a mistake. I was rushing between meetings. He shrugged. You know how forms are. But I was starting to understand that with Ethan, mistakes always seemed to move in the same direction. Then I checked our joint account and found $12,000 gone. Transferred into something labeled EH Development Holdings. Ethan's side business, the one that was always about to break through, and somehow never did. I confronted him in the kitchen while Owen colored at the table. Ethan didn't even lower his voice. It's called investment. Maybe if you understood how business works, you wouldn't panic every time money moves. Owen looked up at me with wide eyes. I said nothing for his sake, but inside me something was changing. I needed one person to tell me I was not losing my mind, so I called Maddie, my oldest friend, and asked if she could meet me at the park the next day. I brought coffee. She brought silence and good judgment. I showed her the screenshots, the photos, the account transfer, the messages. She read them all without interrupting. Then she looked at me and said, "Claire, this is not paranoia. This is evidence." I nearly cried just hearing the word. Maddie wanted me to confront him right away. I wanted to as well. But the more we talked, the more obvious it became that Ethan was planning something bigger than sneaking around. Men who cheat try to hide pleasure. Men who cheat and organize paperwork are hiding strategy. And I still had no idea what Friday really meant. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I searched the app again and found an archived folder I had missed before. It was buried under deleted chats and old login alerts, like he had forgotten it existed. Inside were exchanged files, voice notes, and one pinned message from Jordan that made my vision blur. "Did your lawyer confirm she'll still get monitored visitation if she spirals before the hearing?" My chest locked. I opened Ethan's response. His answer came an hour later. He said if she signs Friday, the house issue is done. After that, my attorney thinks her anxiety history and those therapy records will be enough to get temporary custody first. Once the kids are with me, she'll settle. I stopped breathing for a second. My skin went cold from scalp to heel. I read every line again, slower this time, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something survivable. They didn't. He was not just sleeping with another woman. He was planning to take my house, use the worst year of my life against me, and treat my children like bargaining chips. That was the first moment I truly understood the shape of the man I had married. I remembered the intake forms from therapy, the medication refill texts, the nights he'd offered to organize paperwork because I was overwhelmed, the way he always liked access, passwords, files, accounts. I used to call it helpful. Then I called it controlling. That night I finally called it dangerous. I sat in the dark with the earbuds still in and whispered, "You will not take my kids." The words sounded small in the bathroom, but they were the first honest thing I had said in months. The next morning Ethan stood behind me while I made toast and wrapped his arms around my waist. If anyone had walked in, they would have thought we were fine. "Friday at 4, he said into my hair. "The notary's confirmed. After that, maybe we can breathe a little." I turned around and smiled at him. It felt like pressing glass into my own skin. "Sure," I said. "Friday." He kissed my forehead and I let him, because sometimes the only way out of a trap is to make the trapper feel safe. But that wasn't the worst part. I went directly to the bank branch listed on the draft paperwork. Jordan wasn't there, But another loan officer met with me after I asked enough calm questions in a voice I barely recognized as my own. I said I wanted to verify what documents had been filed under my name. He clicked through his screen, frowned, and said, "Looks like we already received your electronic acknowledgement on the preliminary package." My blood went loud in my ears. "I never signed anything electronically," I said. He looked uncomfortable in the way people do when they realize they have accidentally stepped into somebody else's disaster. He turned the monitor slightly. There was my name, my email, my supposed timestamp. Only the email wasn't mine. It was an address Ethan created years ago for household admin and barely used. He had signed as me or routed it through an account I didn't monitor. I think part of me still needed proof that clear. On the drive home I pulled over and threw up in a gas station trash can. Ethan had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. When I called him he answered on the fourth ring and sounded annoyed. "I'm in a meeting." "You forged my signature." Silence. Not shocked silence. Calculating silence. Then he said very softly, "You need to calm down before you start saying things you can't take back." I saw it. He exhaled through his nose. "It's preliminary, Claire. Everybody e-signs on behalf of their spouse when things are moving fast. Stop making drama out of process." He said the word like fraud was a scheduling issue. I got home to find one more crack opening in the wall. There was a missed call from Ethan's mother, Diane. We were never especially close. She had the kind of elegant hardness that made every compliment sound inspected before it was given. I almost let it go to voicemail again, but something in me said answer. She picked up on the first ring and said, "Claire, a bank envelope was mailed to my house by mistake. It has your name on it. Ethan told me not to worry about it, but I think you should come get it yourself." My heart started pounding again. I drove to Diane's house with both kids in the back and dread sitting like a stone at the base of my throat. She opened the door before I knocked. No lipstick, no pearls, no polished smile. Just an older woman in a gray sweater, holding a cream envelope with my name typed across the front. She looked at my face once and said, "He's done something, hasn't he?" I didn't mean to tell her. I really didn't. But then she made tea, put cartoons on for the kids in the den, and sat across from me at her kitchen table while I took the tablet from my bag and showed her everything. Not all at once. Just enough. The message. The photos. The voice note about custody. Diane did not interrupt. She read, listened, and closed her eyes for a long time. When she opened them, something old and tired was sitting there. "He learned from his father," she said quietly. I had never heard her say a cruel word about her ex-husband. Not once. Now her fingers tightened around the teacup. Different methods. Same soul. Charm first. Pressure second. Then they make you feel unstable for noticing. She pushed the envelope toward me. "Open it." Inside were copies of business filings I had never seen. LC documents. Credit disclosures. Loan language so dense it made my eyes hurt. But one line stood out so clearly it may as well have been written in blood. Managing member. Claire Holloway. I looked up at her. "What is this?" Diane's mouth tightened. "It means Ethan tied you to one of his failing companies." I thought the custody plan was the bottom. It wasn't. There were 2 more envelopes in a drawer. She admitted Ethan had been having some mail sent to her house, to avoid clutter at home. She handed them over like she hated touching them. One showed overdue business tax notices. The other referenced a commercial line of credit secured against future residential equity proceeds. Even I, out of practice and half panicked, could read what that meant. He wanted my house to rescue his business. Then he wanted me left holding the wreckage. I started crying then. Not soft tears. The kind that shake your shoulders and embarrass you even when nobody is judging. Diane came around the table and put a hand on my back. It was awkward, almost formal, but it was real. "Listen to me," she said. "You are not going to handle this alone. Do you understand?" I nodded because I couldn't speak. That was how my mother-in-law became the most unexpected ally of my life. By sunset, Diane had given me the name of a lawyer she once used for a property fight after her divorce. Talia Mercer. "She does not waste words," Diane said. "You need someone like that." I met Talia the next morning in an office above a pharmacy, still carrying the cracked tablet like it was evidence from a crime show. Talia turned out to be a small woman with sharp eyes and no patience for self-pity. She reviewed the screenshots, the bank disclosures, the e-sign issue, the voice notes, and the school form change. She asked concise questions. Did Ethan have access to my medical records? Only old paperwork, maybe insurance statements. Was the house solely mine before marriage? Yes. Had I signed anything physical? No. Did I have copies of joint account transfers? Yes. She tapped her pen once and said, "He's not preparing for a breakup. He's preparing for extraction." That word hit me almost as hard as asset. Talia told me not to confront him yet. Not emotionally. Not directly. Men like this destroy more when cornered. We gather. We preserve. We let him think you're still inside his version of the story. She wanted copies of everything in 3 places. One with her. One with me. One with someone Ethan couldn't reach. She also told me something I will never forget. The minute a person starts building a case around your mental health, you stop reacting and start documenting. So I did. I photographed every paper. I forwarded every message. I wrote dates times words. I recorded my own memory before he could tell me it happened differently. Ethan, meanwhile, kept acting like Friday was the solution to our financial stress. He brought flowers home on Wednesday. On Thursday he cooked pasta and asked if I wanted to watch a movie after the kids went to bed. I nearly laughed at the performance of him. Then Friday morning Jordan called me. Not texted. Told. I stared at the unknown number until voicemail picked up. She hung up. A minute later another call. This time I answered. For a second neither of us said anything. Then she spoke in a voice that sounded nothing like the polished woman I had seen outside the restaurant. Claire? Please don't hang up. I need to tell you something before this afternoon. I leaned against the counter because my knees had gone loose. You have 1 minute. Her inhale shook. I didn't know. Not all of it. He told me you were separated. He said you were only living together until the house refinance because your credit was better and you both agreed on it. I found out yesterday that he signed documents through an email that wasn't yours, and when I confronted him he got ugly. Really ugly. I said nothing. Then she said the sentence that turned the whole story again. There are internal emails, Claire. He wasn't just trying to refinance. He was setting it up so the fallout would land on you. I closed my eyes. Jordan sent the emails to Talia within 15 minutes. Not all from her official work account because she was clearly trying to save her own skin too, but enough. Enough to show Ethan had been pushing for speed, asking specific questions about how to list ownership, how to route disclosure notices, how to avoid spooking me before funding. There was one chain with a private address I didn't recognize. In it Ethan wrote, once proceeds hit, Claire stays listed as managing member. If audit triggers after that, exposure is on her, not me. Jordan had replied days earlier, are you sure that's clean? He answered, clean enough. I think my body understood the danger before my brain did. My hands went numb. Talia read the email twice and looked up at me with a face that had lost even its lawyer calm. This is bigger than divorce leverage, she said. This is potential fraud, identity misuse, and a deliberate attempt to shift liability. I whispered, can he go to jail? Talia's answer was careful. If enough of this proves out. Yes. That was the second twist. The bigger one. My husband had not simply betrayed me with another woman and a lawyer fantasy. He had built a trap where he could sleep with whoever he wanted, drain our accounts, weaponize my past, steal the equity from my grandmother's house, and leave me carrying his business collapse under my own name. I sat there staring at the screen and realized something almost embarrassing. For weeks I had been fighting to prove I wasn't crazy. In that moment I stopped caring what he called me. I only cared about ending him. Talia created the plan in under an hour. We would not cancel the notary appointment. We would let Ethan come home thinking he still had control. Talia would be nearby. Diane would take the kids upstairs before anything started. We had already alerted the bank's fraud department and arranged for a local officer to be on standby because Talia did not like Ethan's pattern of coercion. Jordan had agreed to make a statement and preserve her internal records before anyone could scrub them. All I had to do was sit at my own dining room table and look my husband in the eye while he walked himself into the truth. That sounded simple until the moment came. At 3:45 I changed into a blue sweater Ethan once said made me look trustworthy. I don't know why that mattered to me, but it did. Ruby and Owen were upstairs with Diane doing a puzzle. unaware that their parents' marriage was balancing over a fire. The notary arrived at 3:58. Ethan got home at 4 exactly, smiling, carrying pastries like a man bringing peace offerings to his grateful wife. He kissed my cheek in front of the notary. "See," he said lightly. "Almost done." He laid the folder on the table and sat beside me instead of across from me, too close, one knee touching mine under the wood. The notary started explaining signatures, initials, dates. My pulse was so hard I could hear it in my ears. Ethan kept one hand on the back of my chair, not affectionate now but possessive. I recognized the pressure of his fingers and wondered how many times I had mistaken ownership for love. When the first signature tab came up, he leaned in and murmured, "Let's not drag this out. You've been emotional all week and I don't want the kids picking up on another episode." "Another episode?" He said it with a smile. Something in me cleared so completely it felt like cold water. I put the pen down. The notary looked up. Ethan's fingers tightened on my chair. "Claire," he said softly, warning now. I turned to him and asked just as softly, "Did you think I'd never check the app?" He froze. Not dramatic movie freeze. Real freeze. The kind that happens when a liar realizes the floor has vanished under his polished shoes. His eyes flicked to the tablet on the sideboard, then back to me. In that half-second I saw fear for the first time. Not concern. Not annoyance. Fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. The front door opened behind him. Talia walked in first, carrying a leather folder. Diane came behind her, face carved from stone. The notary stepped back so quickly her chair scraped the floor. Ethan stood up. "What is this?" Talia set the folder on the table. "This," she said, "is where your wife stops being useful to you." He looked at me, then at his mother. "Mom." Diane's voice did not shake. "Sit down, Ethan." He didn't. Instead he turned to me with that old expression, the one meant to shrink me. "Claire, whatever you think you found, you are blowing this out of proportion." Again. I picked up the tablet and tapped the screen. Jordan's voice filled the room. "Friday will be worth it. After Friday, no more waiting." Then Ethan's own messages. "If she signs Friday, the house issue is done." Then the one about my anxiety history. Then the email printout from the lender chain, slid across the table by Talia like a blade. He lunged for the tablet. The officer who had been standing just outside the open front door stepped in so fast Ethan barely made it around the chair. "Sir," he said, firm and sharp. Ethan stopped, breathing hard, and for the first time in our marriage another man saw exactly what he was under pressure. "Claire," Ethan said, switching tactics instantly, voice breaking into wounded disbelief. "You called the police? Over paperwork? Over some stupid messages?" "Over fraud," Talia corrected. "Over coercion. Over identity misuse. Over what appears to be a planned effort to manipulate custody using misrepresented mental health history. Would you like me to continue?" His face changed then. Not to shame. To rage. He pointed at me. "You ungrateful." He caught himself because the officer was there, because the notary was staring, because his mother had not moved an inch to help him. He lowered his voice and tried one last time. "Claire, honey, you don't understand financial structuring. You never have. You see pieces and invent stories." I stood up. My legs were trembling but my voice wasn't. "No, Ethan. I finally see the full story. That's what scares you." He looked at Diane. "You're taking her side?" Diane stepped forward one pace. "No," she said. "I'm standing on the side of the truth. You should try it once before it buries you." He laughed then, but it came out wrong, cracked and ugly. "You all think you've got something? Jordan's a liar protecting her job. Claire's unstable. She has panic attacks, she forgets things, she—" "Finish that sentence," Talia said, "and I'll make sure a judge hears how eagerly you exploit medical vulnerability when a woman stops serving your interests." He shut his mouth. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. "Ruby." My whole body snapped toward the sound. Diane moved instantly, going to the staircase and calling up in a calm voice, "Sweetheart, stay with your brother for one more minute." Then she looked back at Ethan with such disappointment that even he looked away. That hurt him more than the officer did. He tried to recover. "Claire, we can fix this. We talk privately, we clear up the documents, we cancel today and—" "There is no privately anymore," I said. I took a breath and kept going because I had earned every word. "You told another woman I would fold. You planned to take my house. You moved my children around like furniture. You used the year I almost drowned to prove I deserved less. And you did all of it while standing in my kitchen asking if I wanted coffee. My throat burned, but I did not stop. You didn't break me, Ethan. You just forced me to finally look at you without love covering the view. He stared at me like I was someone he had never met. Maybe I was. The rest moved fast. Talia instructed the notary to leave. The officer took basic statements and noted the preserved evidence while explaining the next steps would involve the fraud department, not some instant handcuffs the way television lies to people. Ethan kept trying to talk around everyone, then through everyone, then over everyone. It did not work. He wanted the room to shrink back into the old shape where only his version counted. It never did. Before he left, he turned to me one last time and said, low enough that maybe he thought only I would hear, "You're going to regret humiliating me." I stepped closer instead of back. "No," I said. "You regret losing control. That's not the same thing." Then I walked upstairs to my children. Ruby looked at my face and asked, "Is Dad mad?" I knelt down and held her bandaged little face in both hands. "Dad made some very bad choices," I said carefully. "But you and Owen are safe. Do you hear me? Safe." She searched my eyes, then nodded with the solemn trust children give when they know the truth is heavy but still want to believe your arms are stronger. That night Ethan did not sleep in the house. The weeks after were not pretty. Real endings almost never are. There were lawyers, emergency filings, account freezes, statements, and a bank investigation that expanded faster than Ethan expected. Jordan lost her job but gave a full statement. Talia protected the house before any funding could move against it. The school contact list was corrected. The joint account was reviewed. Diane, to my shock and gratitude, stayed by my side through all of it, sometimes with practical help, sometimes just with the quiet presence of a woman who knew what manipulation smelled like. Ethan tried every version of himself before the court date started. Charming. Furious. Injured. He sent long emails about misunderstandings and short texts about the children. He accused me of overreacting, then begged me to keep things civil, then suggested therapy for my instability. But once you have seen the machine inside a person, the performance stops working. He had deleted his messages. He had not deleted my memory, or the screenshots, or the app, or the paper trail, or the witness statements, or the part of me he accidentally woke up when he pushed too far. By spring I was working again, first part-time from home helping a local contractor clean up their books, then